Hello and welcome here on Eurosport, where we are watching the first qualifying session for Sunday's Portuguese Grand Prix from this fabulous track close to Lisbon. And John, it's overcast now. We had a sunny morning, and I think the surprise of this morning was the return of Mika Häkkinen being second fastest behind Alain Prost.
Well, everybody here delighted to see Mika Häkkinen make a return to Grand Prix racing, and as we mentioned earlier in the season, it was a great waste of a very impressive talent, and Mika Häkkinen got into his Mclaren and really, I think, decided this is the opportunity that he wanted to go out and just confirm that in spite of having missed 13 Grand Prix in 1993, here at the 14th, he was going to make a major impact, and so far this morning, that is what he did. He was only 0.8 of a second slower than the quickest man, Alain Prost, and he ended up being, well, a couple of thousandths faster than Ayrton Senna, who in fact had a couple of little strange noises from the back of his car, but outstanding indeed from Mika Häkkinen.
That's the top three this morning. Damon Hill in fourth position. He too had an engine problem. And then it's Michael Schumacher in fifth position, complaining of no grip at all. Ricardo Patrese ended up sixth. Mark Blundell seventh. Gerhard Berger in eighth. Ninth, Derek Warwick. And in 10th, Martin Brundle, as ever close to Warwick.
Well, we talked a little bit about Michael Schumacher complaining of no grip. In fact, towards the end of that 1.5 hour session, which was delayed for about 15 minutes, Michael Schumacher put the car into the gravel beds around corners 9 and 10, and he had to sit out the remaining 10 minutes of the session. There was a delay in that unofficial 1.5 hour session when Aguri Suzuki went off fairly substantially in the long and very fast right-hand corner onto the start-finish straight. He neatly took 2 wheels off the left-hand side of his footwork, and we doubt that car will be available this afternoon. Certainly the team were indicating at first look on the car when they got it back at the end of the session that they were not sure they could ready the car for Suzuki this afternoon. And of course, with regulation changes in 93, no spare cars are allowed on any given day.
Watching Ukio Katayama in the Tyrrell Yamaha. Katayama, who ended up 17th fastest this morning. And the Tyrrell team, which is welcoming back, John, very shortly, Harvey Postlethwaite.
Harvey Postlethwaite will be joining the Tyrrell team. Of course, he is a part owner of that team, I believe. It's 20% of the company he became an owner of back in the days when, in fact, he was working for Tyrrell in end of 89 and 1990. And looking at the times, we see that currently Derek Warwick is the quickest of the 5 cars we've seen so far. Ukio Katayama now is second quickest. And the reality of, I think, Derek Warwick being out so early, in fact, is that he will try and do his 12 laps. Those are the maximum you're permitted in qualifying, to enable Aguri Suzuki to get into Derek Warwick's car. There is always here a problem in Portugal of weather, and 10 minutes before the session started, there was a very fine drizzle of rain over the paddock. Now, looking out to well, I suppose it's out to the west, the sky looks quite clear, lots of blue. But what would happen on Saturday is another matter. So the footwork team, I think, would like to let Suzuki get into Warwick's car towards the end of the session and at least register a time that would be, let's say, where he would expect to be if he was in his own car.
Derek Warwick recording a 1:15.8, which is just as fast as he did this morning on his very first flying lap. Car number 21, that is Michele Alboreto in the Lola Ferrari. And, well, I think we're all sad to say, John, this seems to be the very last Grand Prix for this team.
There was a press announcement yesterday, and the Scuderia team, Lola Ferrari team, paid thanks to the Ferrari company for the supply of engines over the last 2 years, and they wanted to make that announcement, and a partnership which didn't really bring very much success, not as much as they had hoped for, but nonetheless it was a partnership which hopefully was of some benefit to both parties.
Michele Alboreto starting his 178th Grand Prix here. He's won 5 in his Grand Prix career. That's the same amount as you won, John, isn't it?
From memory, Allard, is going back rather a long time, and if I think about it long enough, I'm sure I could agree with you. Yes, 5 was my tally, and I wish there was more. And of course, today in Grand Prix racing, a Grand Prix driver's career can extend a great deal longer than, let's say, back in the late 70s, early 80s. And we've got Riccardo Patrese well into the 200s, and Alain Prost, this should be his 197th Grand Prix, and it will not be until 1994 that he will break that 200.
Rubens Barrichello is currently second fastest, 0.003 of a second slower than Derek Warwick, and that is an improvement over this morning's time.
Well, Barrichello, of course, is not driving his regular Jordan. He's driving a car with an extended wheelbase. Over the past season, the Jordan has not been the easiest car to set up and then to drive, and Gary Anderson and the team have been working on a longer wheelbase setup, and that has made the car a lot easier to drive, more consistent, and of course in doing so you also alter the aerodynamics of the car, and I think that the team feel that that change is for the better. And I understand that in fact the layout for the 1994 Jordan is also going to incorporate, and probably an even longer wheelbase than we currently are seeing here with the 93 car.
Derek Warwick, 4 second place finishes is his best result, and well, we don't know what's going to happen to the future of Derek Warwick, whether it's in Formula 1 or maybe across the Atlantic in Indy cars. Well, sliding the car around quite a lot there.
Yes, very, very hard indeed. On the throttle, coming into that slow right then left. Now this is the corner where teammate Suzuki went off, and Warwick looking for further improvement on his 1 minute 15.8. And well, you see the difference, minute but sufficient, and I would think that Warwick now will quickly go back to the pits, get a second set of tyres, race tyres ready, and get his second run in as quickly as possible. In the meantime, Jean Alesi in his Ferrari.
Of course, Ferrari having had a very good weekend in Monza, but this a totally different circuit, a circuit that's very bumpy, although it's been resurfaced for about 75%. The left-hand corner we see here actually was not resurfaced, and according to most of the drivers, that's where the bumps were very bad indeed.
The worst bump, in fact, was at the end of the straight, but all around the Estoril circuit it was extremely difficult to find the balance between the right spring rate for ride, but also for handling. And well, Alesi, as ever, trying hard, locking up the left front under braking. And in spite of the resurfacing, you can still see on the Ferrari, all they've done in reality is put a new surface on top of the old. And while it may be an initial improvement, it's still not, in fact, as good as other surfaces in current use at other circuits. Well, Alesi 3/10, almost 4/10 quicker than Derek Warwick, and now all he has to do is maintain that progress all the way around this very, very exciting corner. To stand out and watch it there takes your breath away as ever.
1:15.531, currently the fastest time from Jean Alesi, and that is on his first flying lap of this afternoon session, which is some 10 minutes underway, and we've had 12 cars out on the circuit so far. Jean Alesi, who was not a happy man this morning, being in 16th position when he did a 1:17.0, so as expected, a big improvement from the Frenchman.
I think one of the problems Ferrari has is, like most teams, after the round of winter testing at Estoril, you're not allowed to test on the circuit. Ferrari had a difficult test in the early part of the year, end of last year. The car changed dramatically since then, so they're coming here virtually blind, and for a team like Ferrari, that's something that they would not want to do particularly.
While Jean Alesi is faster than his own time, teammate Gerhard Berger has gone into the 1:14, so 1:14.942. There we see Gerhard Berger's split time on the right. So also Gerhard Berger with an improvement, and I think, John, we can safely say the track will pick up speed all through the weekend.
Well, certainly this afternoon we should see improvements over the morning times, and in fact with Gerhard Berger that's almost half a second faster than he was this morning. Now Jean Alesi has deposed Berger back to second place. He's improved considerably as well, up to 14.798. And that's basically what we're going to see, I suspect. As long as you get a clear lap, you should find improvement over your former fastest lap. Well, Berger over the curves as he comes onto this final and very fast straight. I'm waiting to see if any improvement from Berger in that final lap. Not. Yes, it is 14.558. And that really, Allard, I think, is going to be what we expect throughout the remaining, 48 minutes of this session.
John, the 1:14.558. We see it on our screen at the moment. Is also a very big improvement over Ferrari's time of last year. The fastest time then was a 16.8, so that's like 2.3 seconds.
Well, here's the man in Portugal that all the thousands of fans are going to come and want to see do well, Pedro Lamy. And not a particularly easy session for Pedro Lamy this morning. He had a spin here on the exit. He rotated his Lotus, and once again finding it, I think, quite difficult to adjust to driving a Grand Prix car, and particularly in Estoril, the physical loads are probably higher here than at any time in the Pedro Lamy's experience of motor racing.
That is the situation at the moment. The top 8 with Carl Wendlinger in 3rd position, the man who was very fast this morning down the straight. So we haven't seen a McLaren out, we haven't seen a Benetton or a Williams on the circuit yet, but we hope we will have them after the break here on Eurosport. Welcome back here on Eurosport. Welcome back to Portugal, where Emanuele Naspetti has just put his car in the gravel. So after 3 laps, that's the end of his qualifying session this afternoon. We've got 45 minutes to go, and we're watching World Championship leader and the man who can finally put a seal on that World Championship on Sunday, Alain Prost.
Well, Alain Prost has come here with that purpose in mind, and in fact I understand that he doesn't want to have any disruptions over the weekend, and he's trying to defer any interviews, any commitments, commercial and sponsor commitments, until at least sometime late in Sunday afternoon, at which point he is hoping that the World Championship for 1993 will be beyond dispute. And one has to say the argument in his favor is very strong indeed.
Alain Prost, the split time we're going to see very soon, has not recorded a time yet. He's gone out after 15 minutes and 35 seconds. While Mark Blundell has now moved into 2nd position in the Ligier, 1:14.7, and that as well is half a second faster than this morning. So John, I think, are we going to see the very first 1 minute 12 second lap around this circuit here?
Well, it's not going to be this lap, but this is Alain Prost just building up, and if he's got a clear track ahead, it would be a brave man that would bet against him. Certainly getting down to pole position of 1992, or arguably beating what was a faster pole position in 91, that was Riccardo Patrese. And I think that the 1 minute 12 second barrier certainly is going to be very, very closely in the sights of Alain Prost. He will be very anxious, as he's been in the last few Grand Prix, to secure pole position on Damon Hill.
Oops.
Now that doesn't look like racetrack to me. We'll wait to see quite which part of the circuit Damon has visited the gravel trap. Well, it's seemingly that's behind the pits, I believe, directly behind the pits.
But Damon got out of that and probably go straight back into the pits, have a quick check over, and then go out yet again. Alain Prost, the time to beat was a 57.922, and that's 1.2 seconds faster than Gerhard Berger's fastest lap. So that should be a very low 1 minute 13 for Alain Prost. Well, a high 1 minute 12, a 12.843. So, John, that's the fastest time ever officially recorded round the Estoril circuit.
And Alain Prost continuing on, though I believe in this lap we've got Martin Brundle just ahead of him, so he will, I think, take it easy in this lap, and it's very much a part of Alain Prost's nature, having achieved a good lap, a good clear time, that he's going to want now to think about it on this lap, also give his car a chance, particularly the tyres, to stabilise once again. And if the track looks clear as he comes up to that final right-left chicane, I suspect he'll pick up the pace and have another go at trying to improve on that provisional pole time.
Which is what he did this morning, John. He did a quick lap and then a slow lap, a quick lap and then a sequence of those.
This circuit it's very hard on cars, very hard on tyres. And of course this year with the much smaller rear tyre in particular, and in spite of having traction control, the loads you impose on a qualifying lap are very high. So here we see Damon Hill. This is the moment when Damon let the back end of the car get away, and that's something that he was quite lucky. The car didn't go inwards into that barrier but spun outwards and through the gravel, and we did see that he maintained the momentum backwards and got back to the pits. So there he is. The stones around the gravel traps, it's not quite gravel, it's more like a rock trap than a gravel trap. They are large lumps of rock that have been broken down into smaller lumps of rock, and they themselves can do significant amount of damage to tyres, but also to radiator boxes, bodywork, and most principally the underbodies. And damage to an underbody is something that is not immediately repairable.
There are still a part of the sticker on Damon Hill's car, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was his out lap or his first lap.
I suspect it was his first lap. Well, there we see what happened. Turned in, the back end just stepped away from him, no chance of regaining control.
Alain Prost, a 1:12.843, that is the provisional pole position. Then Riccardo Patrese, a 1:14.206, a very good performance by Riccardo, who improves by nearly a whole second over this morning's time. Then Gerhard Berger, who was fastest earlier on, Mark Blundell, Jean Alesi, JJ Leto in 6th, Carl Wendlinger in 7th, and Martin Brundle in 8th position, as has been since Hungary, just in front of Derek Warwick.
Well, interesting with Mark Blundell, his time, he's the quickest of the passive cars here this weekend on a circuit, ostensibly, that is absolutely perfect for an active car. So the Ligier team at this point of the proceedings certainly have got a setup which pleases Mark Blundell, but Martin, of course, a little bit further back, and it seems as if his shadow, as you say, Allard, for the last few Grand Prix, Derek Warwick, is still his shadow here this weekend.
Well, Mika Häkkinen's just gone out onto the circuit. Johnny Herbert, a 1:15.831, and that is 9th fastest so far. So Johnny just creeping into the top 10, and he's now on a slow lap, I think. Herbert, who didn't have a very good race here last year. Actually, he's done 2 Portuguese Grand Prix, and he's never done more than 1 lap, if I believe right. Well, riding with Häkkinen.
Well, this is the man who really had everybody in the paddock, I think, sniggering a little bit, because they expected Mika to come in and say, well, the car is very unstable over the bumps. It's understeering one way, oversteering the other way. I can't drive the car. Well, maybe nobody told Mika Häkkinen about the car's characteristics, because he was absolutely outstanding this morning, and I would expect nothing less this afternoon. And that is just typical Häkkinen, absolutely committed. And, well, teammate Ayrton Senna ended up fractionally slower than Mika this morning, and who would bet the situation will not be the same this afternoon.
While we are watching Mika Häkkinen, Alain Prost has just done a 1:12.114. And I think, John, are we going to see a 71-second lap here this weekend?
Well, that time was done on the 6th lap of his first run in his first set of tyres. He is going to go back into the pits. He's got a second set of tyres with the knowledge and a fresh set of tyres and the ability now to know where he can commit with more grip. You have to say that it's going to be at 1:11 something.
Mika Häkkinen, that long right-hander in front of him. Turn 11, I think it's called, or Kalff du Sol or something.
Well, Häkkinen looks brilliant as he exits, and we're waiting now to see what the time differential between himself and Prost is. 13.726 puts him onto the front row of the grid, temporarily that is, alongside Alain Prost. And really, what a disappointment, I think, for every motor racing fan that Mika Häkkinen did not compete in the first 13 Grand Prix of the year, whether it be in the Mclaren or any Grand Prix car, because for sure, along with the likes of Michael Schumacher, he is one of the stars of the late 90s, or middle 90s through the late 90s, but still locking up that inside front wheel. He did it throughout the session this morning and doing it again.
Well, talking about the other star, Michael Schumacher, John, he's just put in third fastest time, a 1:13.863. So both Häkkinen and Schumacher out on the circuit.
I think the difference is that McLaren, as ever, have been working harder, I think, than any team in Formula One works to try and find the balance, the combination of aerodynamic and mechanical grip that this car seemed to lose during the mid-season. They found a lot of it at Silverstone. They found a bit more of it at Penbury on Tuesday and Wednesday. And this literally is the result of it.
Mika Häkkinen, is he able to get into the 1 minute 12 seconds? A 1:12.956. And, well, brilliant effort.
Well, there's one man I can assure you will be standing in the pit lane smiling from ear to ear, and that's Ron Dennis, because he knew Mika Häkkinen was good. He knew that throughout the year, with all the testing that Mika has been doing on behalf of the team, his commitment, his spirit, in spite of not being a Grand Prix driver, never ever changed. He had Ron Dennis's word that he would be in a Grand Prix car some point this year. Ron has delivered. Certainly Mika Häkkinen is delivering impressively, and two people who probably will sit and be smiling at each other once this session is finished.
The situation is that Allard Prost done a staggering 1:12.114. Then it's Mika Häkkinen, a 1:12.956. And then it's Schumacher, Alesi, Riccardo Patrese, Gerhard Berger, Mark Blundell and JJ Lehto in 8th position. Well, we've had 25 minutes of this session gone, and we've had 24 cars out on the circuit. On our Tag Heuer Olivetti computer, it said this morning, lap record 1:13.001, 1991 Riccardo Patrese, and that has now changed to all lap record.
Well, Alain Prost has demolished the old, that's a qualifying lap record, incidentally, not a race lap record. That's somewhere in the 1 minute 16 second region. But undoubtedly, like the qualifying record, that's going to be destroyed in the course of this weekend's Grand Prix. So we're looking to see what Mika Häkkinen's teammate Ayrton Senna is going to do. And for the first time in a very long time, Ayrton Senna's got a challenger from within his own team.
John Lazy being weighed, coming into the pits, while Michael Schumacher pressing the buttons on the steering wheel and, if I believe right, ride-out control?
Yes, he's got ride-out control and there's other buttons, but looking at Schumacher from this camera position, the car still does not look very comfortable, and it was coming up to this point of the circuit in the morning, 1.5 hour session. Just on the exit here on the left-hander, that he plonked it into the gravel trap. And the car still looks very nervous, very fidgety. And this is really a contrast from what we've seen again in the mid-season. Benetton made enormous strides in performance, and the car looked absolutely brilliant in Spa and Hungary. But at Monza they seem to lose car performance, and they so far have not appeared to regain it. Now Schumacher's third quickest, he's just some half a second slower than Mika Häkkinen. But watching the McLaren and watching the Benetton, currently the McLaren looks the better car of the two.
Michael Schumacher improving to 1:13.403. And this is the end of his first run. He's done 6 laps, so he'll go back into the pits, and out of the pits comes Damon Hill, the winner of the last 3 Grand Prix. While also Ayrton Senna is ready to go out on the circuit. They've got a warm-up lap and then 1 flying lap. And by that time, we should be back here on Eurosport after this little break. Here on Eurosport, welcome back with Ayrton Senna, who is one of 4 cars out on the circuit, the other one being Damon Hill. Ayrton Senna, Damon, a 1:15.0 on his fourth flying lap, sorry. We've got Philip Alliot out on the circuit, and Aguri Suzuki is on track at the moment. So a 1:15.074 for Damon Hill, and that is 10th position, and a 1:13.2 for Ayrton Senna, and that is 3rd position, 0.3 of a second slower than Mika Häkkinen.
And Ayrton Senna is very serious indeed about this qualifying attempt. He was virtually half a car across the curbing on the exit of that very fast right-hand corner at the end of the start, finish straight. And reflecting back to saying this is the first time this year, and probably quite a long time, in fact, I would think even back to the days of Alain Prost when he was at McLaren, that Senna's been confronted with the kind of pace that Mika Häkkinen has displayed so far this morning and this afternoon. Half a second slower at the first intermediate than Alain Prost. Well, that, if he can maintain it, would put him ahead of Häkkinen. The difficulty is maintaining it.
Damon Hill improving to a 13.329, and the difference between Senna and Prost is 0.8 of a second. So Senna probably being fairly close to Mika Häkkinen, but I would suspect a little slower.
Well, basically the time between the two this morning was virtually inseparable, 13.719. And well,
something wrong there.
Something changed. It did appear as if Senna did back off as he came onto the straight for some reason. We are unable to explain what the reason is. But here we are with Damon Hill. Damon currently in 4th place and really looking to make up for a lot of lost time this morning. He had to have an engine change because there was an oil leak on that engine installed in the car, and then he further compounded his lack of laps with a little spin into the gravel bed, but fortunate enough to get his car out. So Damon now on his 6th lap of this session.
And Damon Hill still being on the tyres he spun off with earlier on, a 12.290, and that is a 10th away from pole position, and he is on the front row of the grid for the moment.
And considering the lack of lappery that Damon had, and that slight upset at the start of the session, I think he will feel a little bit more satisfied. And of course, now having done 6 laps on that set of tyres, and those are the tyres that he was off the track with, he's going to go back in and get a fresh set.
Well, we watch the top 8 on our screen. Williams, then McLaren, then Michael Schumacher, Jean Alesi, and Riccardo Patrese and Gerhard Berger. So the 4 top teams are on the front 4 rows of the grid.
Well, Senna back in the charge, and really we weren't able to see clearly why he chose to abort what looked a reasonable lap, but he did so on that final turn 11. Did a slow lap, then again back on the pace and way over the curbs. So maybe we're going to see an extension of the potential of Ayrton Senna, almost half a second in fact slower than Prost at that midway point, and that's about the difference it was 2 laps ago.
Ayrton Senna is the last man to have pole position as another car than a Williams, which was Canada 1992. Since then we've just had Williams on the front row, and that went very sideways.
Well, he's certainly driving his car on the limit. You can see even in the middle of the corner the back end is just fidgeting and not very comfortable to be driving a car like that. 14.039, and really it's in that long right hand corner to me that the problem Senna's confronted with is really at its worst, and the car just looks too nervous. He's trying to get that very fine turn in as you want, but the loss is that the back end of the car is not as stable or as consistent as Mika Häkkinen's car, and Senna really, I suppose, is responding to that challenge.
Riding with Gerhard Berger, currently 8th on the grid. And we don't really know what the time is he's doing at the moment. Gerhard, who's on lap 6. And that's his 6th lap out of his allocated 12 this afternoon. And we've seen all 26 cars out. Slowest so far is Luca Badour in 26th position. Naspetti 25th, but he only done 3 laps before parking his car in the gravel. And then it's Michele Alboreto in 24th and Pedro Lamy in 23rd position. Gerhard still having that, he still does have that elbow problem, which has affected him since Hungary.
I think, in fact, he had a further little operation on it very shortly after the Italian Grand Prix, and it's an infection that is actually spread in his left elbow, and it's been a great nuisance and discomfort to him. And apart from anything else, you're having to take antibiotics, which are not a good thing when you're competing at such a high level in sport. And unfortunately, the cure is really rest, no activity. If you're a Grand Prix driver, that is not an option that you can favour.
So Gerhard to finish his 7th lap. His fastest time so far is a 1:14.558, and well, he's cut close, but just a little bit slower, so he'll remain in 8th position. Fastest passive car so far is Mark Blundell in 9th, and then we have JJ Leto in 10th, Carl Wendlinger in 11th, and Martin Brundle in 12th. And the gap between Blundell in 9th and Brundle in 12th is 0.4 of a second.
Gerhard Berger just around now. This is directly behind the pits in Estoril. And looking around him as we see Rubens Barrichello and the lengthened Jordan. This is his second run on the second set of tyres. And in fact, he's completed 9 laps. That was his 10th lap. Let's see what the time was. Well, 1:22.755 was a building lap. So he's got, in effect, 2 left.
Well, John, with nearly 22 minutes to go in this session, could it be that Barrichello is going to finish a run and then give the car to Emanuele Naspetti?
It is a possibility. The only problem, of course, for Naspetti is that he's not driven Barrichello's car, or, as is the case in Naspetti's own car, it is still in the original wheelbase configuration. So jumping into this, of course, he's got at least 1 set of tyres. He could go out and improve his time, but it would be quite a situation for him. First, and Barrichello right over the curbs, coming up the hill, 2.5 seconds slower than Alain Prost. Well, it looks suspiciously like some improvement. Barrichello was up to 6th early in the session, now down into 15th place. And there you see, he comes up to take 15.479. That's a small improvement, yeah.
Well, that's 13th. So he jumps 2 places, just ahead of Johnny Herbert now in the Lotus. But Barrichello, well, I think this is the end of his run, because he hasn't got any laps anymore. He can't get back up to speed anyway.
Well, back with Derek Warwick, who's back into his car, having let Aguri Suzuki complete his 5 or 6 laps. And Suzuki, in fact, in 17th place. Derek Warwick in 15th, indicating that the basic car setups are very similar in terms of how they like the car to react on the circuit, but also both men are about the same size. The only thing is Derek Warwick, I think most kindly could be described as being slightly chunkier than Aguri Suzuki.
Footwork team, as most of the other teams staying on for a big test here next week, and they're actually trying quite a few young up-and-coming drivers. Well,
one of those drivers is another Dutchman, Makes Allard Kalff, in fact, seem rather old. Allard, pronounce his name for me, please.
Verstappen, John.
And he's the man that dominated the German Formula 3 Championship, and a protege of Willy Weber. He's the man who manages Michael Schumacher, and he was the man that has been guiding Schumacher's career all the way from the days as a Mercedes-Benz junior team member. So Verstappen certainly is one of a number of young drivers that are seriously considering missing Formula 3000, which they're entitled to do, having won a national Formula 3 championship. And I have to say I concur with Weber's opinion that if a driver like Verstappen is able to get lots of laps during the off-season in a team that is, let's say, sympathetic to young drivers, that would be the right move.
Well, we are watching Derek Warwick, who moved up to 13th position on the 1:15.355, and let's see whether the clock will stop during this lap. And it's a little quicker, a 1:15.210, so he's taken up his place right behind Martin Brundle again.
So Brundle in 12th and Warwick in 13th. Now they seem to be able to shake the other away these days. Looking back into the Lotus pits, which of course in Estoril is a centre of attention, and all around the shopping areas there's photographs of only one driver, and that is Pedro Lamy.
Alain Prost and Damon Hill are the fastest two so far. Then it's Häkkinen and Senna, Schumacher, Alesi, and Riccardo Patrese and Gerhard Berger. We're going to take... Welcome back here on Eurosport. We've got just over 16 minutes to go in this afternoon's qualifying session. The first qualifying session for Sunday's Portuguese Grand Prix. The man that's second at the moment, Damon Hill, is on his second set of tyres on the circuit. He's just left the pits, so this is his out lap.
Well, all focus in the Williams team this weekend really, again, has got to be on Alain Prost. As after that unfortunate engine failure, some 5 laps from the end of the Italian Grand Prix, suddenly Damon found himself the victor, and it was an outstanding drive from Damon Hill. He got trapped on the first corner, of course. Ayrton Senna vaulted over his rear wheel, and Damon delighted to make it 3 in a row. And in fact, it was the first Grand Prix that he and his father have won, shared a Grand Prix victory in.
Damon, this is a downhill bit, and then it's all uphill to that very fast right-hander again. Half a second away from Alain Prost. That's a lot of time, to be honest. Got one pole position so far. That was in France when he took it from Alain Prost. Got 2 fastest laps, 3 victories. Not bad for someone who's done 15 Grand Prix, John.
Well, when you're in a winning position, and you've got to take advantage of it. And Damon, 1.6 seconds slower than Alain Prost, second intermediate time. Derek Warwick pulled over. He saw Damon coming, and so no time lost due to that. So it looks clear track ahead, and really now it's just down to commitment and the knowledge that on his first run he was only out a 1/10 of a second from Alain Prost's provisional pole time. And a 1/10 of a second in time is very small margin indeed, but just trying to make it up plus a further 1/10 at times literally seems impossible.
13 cars out on the circuit, and I think, John, in that last 15 minutes we're going to have quite a lot of traffic.
Well, traffic is always a major problem on any racetrack, and in Estoril there are places to pass, but they're difficult. And ideally what you want is a nice clear track, and just hope that when you do come around any one of these corners, which are really blind from the driver's point of view, you're not confronted with the track covered in gravel or dust. And there we see it at 57 thousandths quicker than Prost. Now he's got to maintain the the drive onto the straights, and that's the problem. Unfortunately, Damon, I'm sure, will have lost those vital tenths that he made up. 12.921. Traffic once again interfered with what looked to me to be a pretty good lap.
Alain Prost on the circuit as well. So we're on for a very interesting last 25%. Michael Schumacher on the circuit. So we've got all the top runners out, basically. I think the only one, or one's not, is Mika Häkkinen, and Ayrton Senna just about to leave the pits, I think.
Well, Prost, that was the end of his first flying lap. This is the beginning of a second, and this will be proof of Prost never needed it, that he is the man that will be on pole position. And you can see so neat as he turns into corners. He's so economical with how he drives a racing car. It's not flamboyant, it's not extrovert, but the speed is there. 32.6 was his quickest midpoint time. He's marginally quicker. 1 minute 12.114 is the time he is looking to improve upon. And well, Allard, do you want to have a bet with me? He's going to get into the high 1 minute 11s, or what's your judgment?
Well, whatever he's going to be, John, he's going to be on the provisional pole position, because Damon Hill has run out of laps while Naspetti is out in one of the Jordans, so that is in Barrichello's car. Damon has crossed start finish 11 times, so he's got to come into the pits the next time. And Alain Prost can, well, he can do whatever he likes, but he is going to be on the provisional pole position when this session starts tomorrow afternoon at the same time.
Well, what we're really waiting to see, in fact, is the McLaren twins, Mika Häkkinen and Ayrton Senna, have only competed 6 laps apiece. In the meantime, Alain Prost, this will be his last flying lap. Unfortunately for him, Naspetti was in a part of the track that he would not be comfortable taking the calculated risk to dive up the inside. He doesn't know Naspetti. He did compete in a few Grand Prix at the end of last year, but that was Alain Prost's sabbatical year.
If Alain Prost keeps this speed up and keeps the momentum up, then we are going to see a 1 minute 11 second lap, John. He was 0.16 seconds faster, and now he's 0.3 of a second faster. So, well, 11.75, something like that.
It just really depends how you exit onto the straight. And in the case of Alain Prost, it looked pretty good. 11.683, a massive 4.4 of a second quicker. And, well, undoubtedly that situation is not going to be challenged this afternoon. The only people really with any possibility would have been Häkkinen and Senna. And in my view, to find the 1.3 seconds that Häkkinen needs is asking an enormous amount. Literally, their Ford HB has not got the horsepower of the Renault V10. And certainly they may improve into the middle 1 minute 12s. Any more than that would be just phenomenal.
We are riding with Riccardo Patrese, who is currently 7th fastest, and he is 0.8 of a second slower than teammate Michael Schumacher. And this is Riccardo's last lap, a 14.384. That's not an improvement for Patrese, so he will stay at least in 7th position.
And Mark Blundell now in 9th place, and he's completed 11 flying laps, so his day is finished. So McLaren's strategy appears to be paying off. They've got about 9 minutes. The track, well, I was going to say it's reasonably clear. The 12 cars currently on the track.
So Michael Schumacher's run is finished. He's completed his 11 flying laps. So he's just going to come back into the pits now. The only people in the top 10 who's got laps left is Gerhard Berger, Häkkinen and Senna. And if we go further down the list, we see Brundle with laps to go, Johnny Herbert, Aguri Suzuki, and for the rest, no one in the top 20. Oh, that's interesting. Well, we are riding with Michael Schumacher, who's going into the pits. And here we see that car from the outside. Ayrton Senna and Mika Häkkinen have gone out together. Oh, Gerhard Berger.
Berger's popping past Lotus's and the Benetton, and of course, again, distraction for a driver. Never knowing entirely what the car ahead of you might be doing, whether it's going to stay online or... And that's really the problem with traffic on a circuit like Estoril, which is quite a lot of corners and a very compact amount of real estate. So Berger now en route to complete his 10th lap, 14.735, 2/10 slower than his provisional 8th place he achieved a few moments ago.
So Gerhard Berger on his last flying lap. And there are less and less cars on the circuit. Let's just look. It's about 10 cars on the circuit at the moment. And this is the situation. Prost, Hill, Häkkinen, Senna, Schumacher, Alesi, Riccardo Patrese and Gerhard Berger in 8th position.
Well, once Berger returns to the pits, you don't have to be a genius to imagine that all the attention will be on Senna and Häkkinen. And Senna running ahead of Häkkinen on the circuit, and very shortly indeed Berger will be driving into the pit lane at the end of this lap.
Gerhard Berger, is he improving? He is. His 1:14.159 has been good enough to demote Riccardo Patrese to 8th position. So now we've got Ferraris in 6th and 7th positions on the grid. Mika Häkkinen.
Well, this man has been blinding all day. And just watch him through this final long, very, very difficult right-hand corner. Puts the left-hand wheels up the curb as he exits onto the start-finish straight. 13.965 is exactly 1 second slower than he achieved on his first set of tyres. But I must say, Häkkinen looks very, very confident, very smooth, purposeful.
Committed.
And as if he's been in this car not just testing, but in Grand Prix. Yet again, at left front, he's been locking it up now, but again, the Tyrrell gets into the way, and that will have been a few finish oaths in the helmet. 0.8 of a second slower than Prost at first intermediate, and I would say certainly 2/10 of that would have been lost, finding his way around the Tyrrell.
0.8 of a second slower, John. That would actually... That could see an improvement from Mika Häkkinen on this lap, unless he's decided to give this lap a miss.
Well, I think if you like to hypothesize, if the Tyrrell hadn't been there and Häkkinen had a clear lap and was able to improve, in fact, he would have been very, very close to putting Damon Hill off the front row onto the second row.
Senna has improved to 1:12.954, so that is faster than Mika Häkkinen, who'd done a 1:12.956.
Well, that last lap of Häkkinen was just almost a floating lap. Now, this is something a little bit more serious and committed. And it's interesting to watch. Well, we're trying to watch anyway, the in-car camera from Mika Häkkinen. And really, from the very first time he drove a Grand Prix car, which was at Silverstone way back in 1990, in a car that he didn't fit in with a steering wheel about the size of a 5 or a 50 penny piece. He's driven with a level of commitment, and he seems to have the knack of being able to drive in a car which has got a lot of front-end bite. It's what I would call a very twitchy car, but for some reason Häkkinen, JJ Leto, and of course Keke Rosberg are the men from Finland who seem to like that setup in the car.
Mika Häkkinen, who's lost 0.8 of a second between the first and second intermediate.
I suspect that with the traffic on his previous lap, he's just lost that little bit of edge of grip that his tyres would have had, and it's all just appearing to drift away now from Mika Häkkinen in his enthusiasm really to consolidate what he achieved this morning, and with a little bit of bad luck with having traffic at the wrong part of the circuit at the wrong time. And now his teammate Ayrton Senna immediately ahead of him. Well, Senna will not be an obstruction. You see, pull right over to the left to enable Häkkinen on his now final flying lap to see if he can improve. 0.7, slower than Prost at the second quickest part of the circuit.
There's Naspetti, who is in Rubens Barrichello's car and has not improved on his time he did in his own car. And Mika Häkkinen, the second intermediate time, and again he's lost a lot of time on that infield section.
Well, again, Naspetti, I think, was sort of driving around thinking about what he's on traffic, of course. Well, let's forget it, Mika. That's the best you're going to achieve today. It's been pretty impressive. And really a great fillip for the McLaren team, who've had a very bad year by their standards, and certainly Ayrton Senna has not had the support from his teammate that one would have expected of a McLaren Grand Prix driver.
We got one I've got 1 minute to go in this session, and John, for the moment, or until we go out tomorrow, the situation is Prost, Hill, Senna and Häkkinen.
Well, it's the first time this year we've seen two McLarens as close together, and we've now two Williams, two McLarens, a Benetton and a Ferrari, in fact two Ferraris in the second Benetton. Really the status has not changed at all, but from McLaren's point of view they've now got consistency, or parity, let's call it that, amongst their drivers. It's very good for the team. It keeps Ayrton Senna honest a little bit, I think, as well. And well, I look forward to Saturday afternoon and seeing how much more progress we can expect from McLaren and Mika Häkkinen.
There's the top 8. We've said it all in there. Positions 9 to 16. 9th and 10th, the fastest passive cars, the Ligiers. Blundell just ahead of Brundle, then JJ Leto and Carl Wendlinger. Derek Warwick slipped down to 13th, just ahead of Rubens Barrichello. Then it's Johnny Herbert in 15th. Pierluigi Martini is 16th. 17th, Guri Suzuki. 18th, Andrea De Cesaris. 19th, Eric Comas. And 20th, Christian Fittipaldi. Well, the last 6 are Katayama, Alio, Lamy, Alboreto, Naspetti and Badoer. John, will we have a look at the times again on our screen? It should be a very interesting session tomorrow.
Well, people like Damon Hill, Senna to a certain extent, certainly Mika Häkkinen and Michael Schumacher, those four really will be looking to make a further improvement. They all had slightly mixed mornings. They certainly had a mixed afternoon. Alain Prost had the best of the leading bunch, did an outstanding job, and will sleep tonight, I think, very comfortable in the fact that he knows as much as those other four would expect to see an improvement. He probably knows inside himself, well, I know I did a good lap, but me, Alain Prost, well, I never really commit myself until the pressure is there. I'm not going to go out and do a 1:08. There's no need to do it. And if I have to improve to secure my pole position for Sunday, I'll do it when it matters.
Tomorrow from 1 till 2 continental time, 12 to 1 if you're in the UK. John Watson and Allard Kalff will be back with the second qualifying session for Sunday's Portuguese Grand Prix. Thank you very much for watching today.